The next mitzvah is we were talking about the sin offerings yesterday, and the idea that we're talking about responsibility, that a person is, we're talking about witnesses and you have responsibility, you get involved and so on and so forth. So the next mitzvah just goes back to 2 mitzvahs ago. Remember, we're talking about the sin offerings that a person brings if you do a various averas. Now there's another sin offering that comes for making either you break an oath or you become impure. There are sin offerings for various forms of impurity. And this sin offering, whereas the other one is standardized, this one is more, this one varies on your wealth. How much, depending on how wealthy you are, there are different types of, if you're poor, so you could bring a different type of offering. The reason being because speech is something that is difficult to control. And tuma also, impurity is something different. You know, you could be walking along and all of a sudden you come in contact with a dead body. And therefore the Torah says that gives a break to a poor man. One of the lessons here is that if you are poor, you don't bring something more expensive, because overspending is also not recommended in halacha. And that's why there's a limitation. When you give tzedakah, you're not allowed to give more than 20%. You've heard that, right? You're not allowed to give more than 20% of your money to tzedakah. You have to give 10%. You're allowed to give more than 20%. You can't give more than 20%. Yeah, but I want to be generous. You can't do that because you could then turn yourself into a poor person. It doesn't do us any good. You know, the Torah expects limitations on all ends. Over generous is not better than is also a flaw. If you're overly good, right? Nobody says that a person has to be taken advantage of. The only exception, the Chafetz Chaim says there is an exception. If a person gives a tithing, when you tithe your money, so you have limitations. However, let's say somebody has a family member who's not well. He says, I want to give $500. He wants to give an extra $500 beyond his limit. He wants to give that in the merit of tzedakah that he gives, his family member should become well. Let's say he gives $500. I want to give $500. Let's say a guy says because he wants that the soldiers should be protected who are fighting, those who are fighting for our defense should be protected. There, you're allowed to go, and it's a specific purpose, you could go beyond the limit. And the reason for that is, if you had a family member who was ill, and you had to pay doctors, you wouldn't put any limit on how much money you pay to doctors. That's part of your spending. In other words, that's beneficial spending as opposed to what you're being taxed, your 10%. So if a guy decides he wants to spend $500 in the merit of that money, somebody should get his parnasa should improve, or somebody should be cured. That the Chafetz Chaim says you're allowed to do because that's a specific expense that you're making. Instead of spending it on a doctor, you're spending it on tzedakah because you believe that the merit of tzedakah can help you. That you're allowed to do. Which brings us to the next mitzvah. And this is, again, another one of the classic examples of a mitzvah which is so far removed from us, technical, removed from us, and it has an absolute bearing on our day-to-day life. Right? And that is the mitzvah that when a pigeon is brought in the Beis Hamikdash, a poor man brings a pigeon. He could bring a pigeon, and if he can't even afford a bird offering, then he brings a flour mixed with oil. Okay, various flour offerings. Now, ideally, you bring an animal, either a goat or a sheep or a calf. Here, a poor man brings a pigeon to the Beis Hamikdash because he can't afford livestock. Now, when he brings the pigeon to the Beis Hamikdash, how is the pigeon shechted? How is the pigeon slaughtered? So there's a process called malika. Malika is where the Kohen takes the trachea and the esophagus of the bird, pulls them towards the back of the neck, and then takes his thumb, and either like this or like this, with his thumbnail, he nips through, it's called nipping, he cuts through the trachea and the esophagus of the bird from the back. That's how he kills the bird. It's called malika. And then he takes the bird and he either sprinkles the blood, he presses the blood against the altar, whatever, then they eventually burn the bird as an offering. Now that is considered one of the more difficult services in the Beis Hamikdash. You got to take your thumb and you got to nail it, and go. You don't have to make a sound, but you have to nip the bird's neck in the Beis Hamikdash. That's the description of the mitzvah. So again, classic mitzvah. You're not a Kohen. We don't have a Beis Hamikdash. You don't have a pigeon. What's it got to do with you? What's it got to do with me? Right? What's this mitzvah got? And the answer is, one of the commentaries says as follows: remarkable what a mitzvah teaches us. Do you know the story in the Gemara? There's a man named Nachum Ish Gamzu. Nachum Ish Gamzu was the one who every time something bad happened, he said, Gamzu Latova. This too should be for the best. And the Gemara tells a story how he got that name because he was bringing some diamonds on behalf of the Jewish people. This guy, Nachum Ish Gamzu, was sent by the Jewish community to appease the authorities. So he took a box full of gems, and he stopped by at an inn. And the people at the inn looked over the box, and they saw that inside the box there were gems. So they filled it with dirt. So he got up the next morning and he just took the box. He went off to the ruler, and the guy took a look at it, and he said, "Hey, what the heck is this? What are you sending us dirt for?" Nachum Ish Gamzu said, "Gamzu l'tov, it's all for the best. I don't know what happened, but somehow it got switched into dirt." And they were very upset. They were going to promulgate a decree against the entire Jewish community for, here, Excellency, as a gift from the Jewish community, and he opens up, it's a box of dirt. So he was not too happy. So Nachum Ish Gamzu said, "Gamzu l'tov, this too is for the best." So they were going to promulgate a decree against the Jewish people, and then the prophet Eliyahu came up dressed as one of them, and he said, well, perhaps that's the magical dirt that Avraham Avinu used when he fought those armies. When Avraham Avinu fought that world war, him and his 318 men, according to some, it was just him and Eliezer, and they went out to fight those armies. So how do you fight 4 kings? So Avraham Avinu took dirt, threw the dirt at them, and the dirt turned into arrows and spears, and he defeated the army. So the guy, Eliyahu Hanavi, dressed as one of them, so they should know it's Eliyahu Hanavi. He said, well, maybe that's part of the magical dirt from their ancestors. So the king says, all right, let's try it. They were in the middle of a war. They went out to the front. They took the dirt, and they threw it. They killed the enemies. He says, great. And he gave him a box full of gems to keep, and he went home, and Gamzu l'tov. Okay, that's how he became Nachum Ish Gamzu. Then on the way back, when he stopped at the inn, the people at the inn said, what happened? They thought this was very strange. So Nachum Ish Gamzu said, well, what I took from here, I brought to there. So he said, no kidding. So they filled, they took all the dirt. I think it says they knocked their own house down and dug up all the dirt and brought these boxes of dirt to the king. And the king went out and tried it, and it was dirt. They say he killed them all. That's what the Gemara says. He executed the whole bunch of them. That's what the Gemara says. Now, this Nachum Ish Gamzu was once traveling, and he had a donkey full of food, drink, and various delicacies. He was on his way to his father-in-law's house. And a poor man stopped him and asked him for something to eat. So Nachum Ish Gamzu said, just one second. He went to get the food. And by the time he got the food out of the sack, the guy was dead. He was lying dead in the street. So Nachum Ish Gamzu cursed himself that his hands that didn't have mercy should be severed. His feet that didn't have mercy should be severed. His eyes that didn't have mercy should be blinded. And he wasn't satisfied until he cursed himself. His whole body should be filled with painful boils. So his Talmidim saw him in the Beis Medrash. They saw him, he was lying there limbless and in pain and blind. And they said, woe to us that we should see you like this. He said, woe to me if you didn't see me like this. I had to get punished for my insensitivity. Now, the question becomes what insensitivity was there. The guy asked him for food. He went and he brought the food. And by the time he got back, the guy had died. So the commentaries say, well, he felt that at his level he should have had food in his hand prepared for the eventuality in case he sees a poor man. That he should have been prepared for that. That's what the commentaries say. That's what the Gemara says. That's what the commentaries say. Okay? That's a Gemara. He cursed himself. He felt he should have been. That's what the Gemara says. So the commentaries explain, based on that, you learn from Nachum Ish Gamzu there's a certain degree of sensitivity that's needed when you're dealing with a poor man. Remember the story I told you, a guy in England? The guy in England came to a charity collector. And he said to this charity collector, this guy gave out he had a Shabbos fund, a Shabbos relief fund. And they used to give families money for Shabbos. So the guy says to him, I'll give you £1,000 donation if you just show me a list of the people that you have on your Shabbos list. The guy said, I'm sorry, we have a policy, we don't reveal the recipients. For their dignity, we don't reveal. The guy says, I'll give you £2,500, but I think for a donation like that, I'm entitled to see the list. The guy says, I'm sorry, we just don't do that. He says, I'll give you £10,000, I'll equal your weekly budget, but I think for that kind of money, I'm entitled to see who's getting, who I'm helping. So he says to the guy, you can give me £1 million, we will never show you the list of people. The guy says, well, thank you very much. That's all I wanted to know. You see, I was a wealthy man. I lost all my money. And I wanted to have to approach you for help for Shabbos. But I was worried that people will find out that I'm approaching you. I just wanted to test to see you're discreet. Please put me on your list. So the rule is that when it comes to tzedakah, when it comes to charity, one of the first priorities when it comes to charity is that you have to maintain the dignity of the poor man. So the commentaries explain, a poor man brings a pigeon to the base of Mikdash. He feels bad enough as it is that he can only afford a pigeon. So the Torah says, you know what? We want to make him feel good. We want the guy to feel that we're so happy about his korban, that he's bringing this pigeon, that we don't even we're so excited about it, we don't even take the time to go find a knife to shech the korban. Wow, a pigeon, give it to me. And you use your thumb. That the poor man shouldn't feel that in any way he's behind. To the contrary, we want him to feel better that he is bringing a korban to the base of Israel. We're so excited about it, we're not even going to take the time to look for a knife. That is a principle. That's what the commentaries explain. And that's the principle when it comes to tzedakah. When it comes to tzedakah, you have to do everything you can in order to help a poor man, that a poor man should not feel in any way, shape, or form a lack of dignity. If you ever walk through Yerushalayim, you know what I call, when you walk in Geula or Mea Sharm, there's what I call the Geula tax. You know, because every few steps there's somebody to help relieve you of your burden. So the first rule is that you don't give a lot of money to anybody who is not confirmed. You know, a guy's asking for money, you give a token donation. You don't give money, if you have big money to give, you only give it to a reputable organization who you know who's running it, you know the organization itself. You don't give money, some guy knocks on your door or some guy on the street, unless you know he's reputable, because there are imposters and there are people who are frauds. So you can't afford, you give them a token donation, give them a shekel, give them half a shekel, whatever it is. Never give 10 agarot, by the way, they'll toss it back at you. You know, there is a certain minimal amount which is considered, what do you call it? And if he does toss it back at you, don't say anything. Whatever you give, if he tosses it back at you, don't say anything, just pick it up and walk away. But don't give an amount that's going to get him to toss it back at you. Now, the guy sometimes looks at you and feels that you're a rich American. And you give him a shekel, and the guy says, hey, you can do better than that, buddy, and he throws it back in. Now, that wasn't your fault, because you're not a rich American. Maybe you are. If you are, please see me afterwards. But even if you're not, you give him a shekel that's a respectable donation for a guy in the street. The guy doesn't want it, pick it up and walk away. Whatever you do, avoid a confrontation. Whatever you do, do not get into any confrontations whatsoever. You know, you go to the Kaisel, and you know, you got all these weirdos at the Kaisel who are willing to also relieve your burden. Some of them even smell like vodka. So you don't give money to a guy, you know, some guy's dressed like King David, you know, another guy's King David's harp, or whatever they are, you know, one is the prophet Eliyahu himself, you know, anybody who you think is odd or strange, you know, you give him a toy, and if a guy is clearly, you know, using it for inappropriate means, the guy needs more vodka or whatever it is, so don't use a little bit of, you exercise some judgment. The guy stops you on the street with a rusty needle dangling out of his arm. You know, I need to take a ride to Beersheba. You need to take a ride, but they're not to Beersheba. You know, so then you don't, what do you call it? Don't. And sometimes they'll even try, you know, once in a while they'll come to you with a sob story. You know, a guy comes over and says, I have to get to Beersheba. Do you have 50 shekels that you give me? You know, I just need to make 50 shekels. I need 50. I have no money. Could you give me 50 shekels for the ticket to Beersheba? So my son once had a guy like that. He said, well, I got a 200 if you got change. The guy says, yeah. And he says, you told me you didn't have any money. You know, so he, and then I had a guy come over to me also, started telling me a sob story. He said, listen, I can't, you know, again, could you lend me some money? I'll take your address. You can trust me. I'll pay you back. I said, sure, I'll be glad to lend you money. Just give me your watch as a security, and as soon as I get the money, I'll give you back your watch. So the guy reaches for his watch like this, probably hoping that since he called my bluff, I'll drop the demand. And I didn't say anything. I just waited for him to take off his watch. He says, you know what? No, I need my watch. You know, and off he wandered into the sunset. So he obviously didn't need the money. So you don't be a fool. Don't be a fool. On the other hand, you give a token donation, and the most important thing is to maintain the dignity and preserve the dignity of the poor person. There was I think I told you this last time, but I'm so impressed with this. First of all, Rav Schiller told us years ago, Rav Schiller told us a story. There were some yeshiva guys who were standing outside the yeshiva, and some of the local neighborhood roughs came by, and they started up with the Jews. You know, they started calling them names. So they got into the good old-fashioned what's called a shegitz fight. That's what we used to call it in Chicago. They got into a shegitz fight, and the fists are flying, and the blows, kicks, and fists, and everything else. And in the middle of this melee, one of the guys says, "Hey, Yossi, you know, we're supposed to be able to learn from all life situations. What are we supposed to learn from this?" So he goes, Moish, the lesson is it's better to give than to receive. Right? That was and that's our attitude when it comes to tzedakah. I'd rather be on the giving end than on the receiving end. They're in Chicago, and the Telz Yeshiva in Chicago is a heartwarming story. These Greek guys started up with some of the yeshiva bachrim. And they started up with them. They were in a real lousy neighborhood. The Telz Yeshiva was in a lousy neighborhood. And they're always having issues. They're always having fights. So these Greek guys started up with these yeshiva guys, and there was a whole bunch of guys hanging around. And one of the guys, was a cold day in Chicago. One of the guys are right in front of a storefront. The Rosh Yeshiva's son, today he's a Rav in America. He's a Rav in Detroit. He was walking there, and one of the guys shoved him, and he went flying backwards through the plate glass window of the store. As he went flying backwards, he was wearing a heavy coat, so nothing happened to him. And just as a reaction, just as an instinct, as he went flying backwards, he just reached out his hand, and he grabbed the guy by the lapels. So he pulled the guy face forward through the glass. So the guy got sliced to pieces. Nothing happened to him. He was protected by the coat. Nothing happened to him. The guy got sliced up. So this happens all yeshivas around the world. Yeshivas are often in bad neighborhoods, and they often have trouble with the locals. So the attitude is it's better to give than receive. Now there's an organization. There's a guy from America who donates in Israel. He donates 700 cartons of chickens a week for distribution among the poor people. Okay, but he doesn't just donate it. He lets the poor people have to pay a certain price. So if a carton of chickens costs 400 shekels, they pay 70 shekels a carton, something like that. So you could feel good that you're paying for it. You're Jewish. Jews never question discounts. They just feel that I got a real bargain over here. And not only that, he's got a customer service number. So you call the line. First of all, you get your choice of hechsherim. Take Ada, Badatz, Reuben. So you feel that you're a customer. And then they've got a customer service line. And you get called by the secretary. She says, were you satisfied? Was the product good? This, that. All in order to help the poor man maintain his dignity. That's the rule. The rule is when you give tzedakah, you want to do anything you can in order to help the poor man. So if you're ever walking in Gula and a guy's there and you're going to give him a shekel, and you reach in your pocket, all you got is a 200 shekel note, don't give it to him and ask for change. Don't give it to him. Then you got to stand there fishing around, it just makes it just prolongs the agony, besides the fact that you got his hopes up when he saw the 200 shekel note, and then you're going to say, well, give me 199 back. So first of all, I guarantee you're not going to walk away with 199. That's first of all. Second of all, you want to, you're teasing the guy. Here's a 200 shekel note, now give me 199 back. And therefore, you have to use your common sense and realize that those are not the circumstances where you should be giving the guy, where you should be giving out money. The next idea is that when a sinner brings an offering, there are certain offerings that he brings that you do not put oil on it. There are certain sin offerings that one does not have to bring. You do not mix. Some you do mix with oil. Some you do not mix with oil. A sin offering, a flour offering that is brought as a atonement for a specific avera, does not get oil mixed in with it. And one of the ideas here is because oil represents prominence. Now, oil floats to the top. The Jewish people are compared to oil. The Jewish people always float to the top in any area of life. If you open up any Time or Newsweek magazine, it's almost like who's who in the Jewish world, right? In finance, it's the Jews. In show business, it's the Jews. In sports, it's the Jews, because it's all about contracts. And in crime, unfortunately, it's the Jews. And in politics, it's the Jews. Much more represented than our numbers. I think, what is the number on the Nobel prizes of all the Nobel? What is it? 25% is Jewish. Out of what percentage of the world? It's ridiculous. Just a ridiculous percentage. Jews have always been heard from, probably more than we should be. And Jews always float to the top. We're compared to oil. We're also compared to olives. Oil comes from olives. And the oil is the best part of the olive. And unfortunately, an olive has to be beaten in order to bring out the best part of the product, which is often the Jewish people. Their loyalty to God is often as a result of being beaten. Unfortunately, when the Jews do well, there's a pasuk that says, "Vayishman Yeshurun Vayivat." Yeshurun, which is the Jewish people, waxed fat, and then they rebelled. when there's a saying in the Gemara, a lion roars when he's got a good pile of meat. A lion does not roar if you put a box of straw in front of him. And so when you become wealthy and you're doing well, you start to forget your obligations to God. That's the unfortunate reality. Therefore, since this is brought as a sin offering, the Torah says you do not adorn a sin offering with oil, which represents prominence and elevation. Therefore, for the sin offering that a poor man brings, he does not put oil on it. Okay. The next one is the completely different subject, which is the offering that's brought for somebody who desecrates hektish. Now let's understand what hektish is. It's a little technical, but it does apply nowadays. You shouldn't get into the situation, but there is something that's called hektish. Hektish means that you have, anybody know what hektish is?
Yeah, you have something and you want to obligate it for use in the Beis Hamikdash.
Good. You consecrate it for the Beis Hamikdash. You declare a certain object. So, for example, if somebody would say, "This is my pen," for example, he says, "This is hektish." Now, what that means is that this item is now owned by the Beis Hamikdash. So, if it's an item that could be used in the immediate use of the Beis Hamikdash, if it's a sacrifice, they'll use it as a sacrifice. If it's something that could be used, let's say gold, which they could then use the gold, melt it, and help coat the walls of the Beis Hamikdash, they'll use it for that. If it's a pen, there are no pens used in the Beis Hamikdash, especially a green one. So if somebody were to consecrate this pen, what happens is it is now owned by the Beis Hamikdash, and you can then redeem it from the Beis Hamikdash. One of the reasons somebody would do something, why would somebody do that? Here's a why would question. We're not in Gemara, so you can ask a why would question. What's the most likely reason why would I consecrate a pen to the Beis Hamikdash if I don't really what do you call it, if they can't use it? Why would I do that? Okay, to protect it could be a reason. To protect it could be you want have this expensive Stradivarius, so you consecrate to the Beis Hamikdash. That could be. There's a more immediate reason. So why did I give that? Why not give money? The answer could be exactly as Mr. Fogel is saying. Let's say I don't have money right now, and I'm in a great mood, and I'd really like to make a donation. I'm in just such a good mood. Your mother-in-law is visiting, and she just told you that she's cutting her 3-week visit down to 2 days, right? You're just over the moon, right? And you say, hey, I'd love to give a donation to celebrate. And so what you do is you don't have any money. So I say, you know what? I don't want to change my mind. I'm going to consecrate. The guy says, I'm going to consecrate that to the Beis Hamikdash. And your mother-in-law says, wow, why are you in such a good mood? I don't know, Mom, I'm having a good day. And she says to you, well, you're so pleasant to be around. I think I'm going to extend my trip to 3 weeks again. So it's too late. Your pen is now bound in the Beis Hamikdash. And the only way you could get it back is by redeeming it for its value. You have to give the value. That way it pegs you before you change your mind. You could try consecrating your mother-in-law, but that doesn't work. That doesn't work. That you can't do. What happens if I consecrate the pen? And I didn't put it in the Beis Hamikdash. It's sitting in my house, and I pick up the pen, and I start writing with the pen. Uy, this was hektish. Uy vey, I just used hektish item. Then the halacha is that you have to bring an offering. And you have to add 1/5 of the value of the thing that you consecrated, that you desecrated. Now, that's a very strict punishment. All it is a pen. The answer is, once you consecrate something, it belongs to the Beis Hamikdash. And using something, if we would see it, imagine you walk into an antique shop, and they've got antique pens and quills from the 1500s. And you decide, all of a sudden your phone rings and you got to write down a number, and you just go, just one thing, you grab one of the, you would never do that. You would never use it. Hey, buddy, what are you doing? You walk into an old music shop, there's a Stradivarius, and you just say, hey, I wonder how this, and you start scratching away. They go, what are you doing, buddy? There are certain things in life that are absolutely off limits. They're absolutely off limits. One of those things is anything that belongs to the Beis Hamikdash. So therefore, to remind us of the severity of items that belong to the Beis Hamikdash and items that are hektish, the Torah says you have to pay a stiff penalty. Okay. Now, the next one is a remarkable idea that actually goes to last week's parsha. It's connected very much to last week's parsha. The Torah says, not in last week's parsha, but the Torah says that there is a concept called an asham. An asham, remember we were speaking yesterday, Yaakov Tuvia, I think you asked about how could a guy end up with his sister-in-law, right? You know, what the story? Okay. That's when the guy did that Aveira for sure, that he has to bring a chatos. Now, what if the guy is in doubt if he did an Aveira? He just doesn't know. So the guy went into his house, the house was dark, and he ended up with either his wife or his sister, and he doesn't know which one it was. Or there's meat in front of you. One of these slabs of meat is chelev, and one is shuman. Shuman is permissible meat permissible fat that comes from a cow, and chelev is forbidden fat that comes from a cow, which is punishable by premature death. And the guy ate one of them, and he's not sure which one he ate. He doesn't know. He has no way of determining it right now. So at this point, if he has no way of determining it, he has to bring what's called an asham, a guilt offering that brought when you're in doubt. I have a serious doubt. I know that there was a forbidden item here, and I might have indulged in a forbidden item. Then you have to bring a guilt offering. You have to bring a korban asham because you're in doubt. If you ever find out the truth, so for example, two witnesses come along and they say, yes, the one on the right was chelev for sure, and we know because it had a little mark in it. On the underside, I actually carved my initial in it, or I put a big ches in it, and this other piece doesn't have it.
What's a bit cool? Does it stuff cool?
Chelev as opposed to chav. Shuman, chelev and shuman. And you determine it is ascertained that you have indeed sinned. Then you bring a sin offering, like you would bring for anything that you know you did for sure. But as long as you're in a state of doubt, then you have to bring what's called a asham. Called an asham tolui. It is a pending offering, pending knowledge of whether or not I did something right or wrong. I'm in a state of serious doubt. It is called an asham if you're pending. Now, you're only liable for this if there was for sure forbidden meat in front of you. I don't even know if one of them was forbidden meat. There might have been two pieces of shuman, then you don't have to bring an asham. I'm not sure that the forbidden item was there. It has to be a level of certainty that I'm certain that I might have done the Aveira, not that I might have done the Aveira. You understand? It's got to be only one step removed. Now, the Gemara says like this. The Gemara says that Rabbi Akiva, when Rabbi Akiva reached this pasuk in the Torah, Rabbi Akiva would cry. Because Rabbi Akiva said, if when a person is in doubt if they did an Aveira, they have to bring an atonement, you're guilty even if you're in doubt. So then you're guilty, imagine all the more so if you did an Aveira for sure, what kind of atonement you need. Now, the question again becomes, why should I need an atonement if I didn't know? Why should I didn't know? What's it my fault? What's the answer? Remember we spoke about this? There is always an element of negligence. Very good, Jeremy. There's always an, that's why I tell you, there are some people who always end up in these situations in life. There are some people who always end up with halachic problems. A guy eats something, he says, oh, it said OR. I thought that meant Orthodox. I thought that was under supervision because it said OR. Some people are always in these situations. Some people are never in these situations. And often it has to do with how much you care. Some people, anytime there's a halachic calamity, they're involved. I heard a terrible story. I love it. This is just to show you how accidental things could be and how careful we have to be. A guy went from New York to Miami. I think it happened in Miami. And he's visiting a friend of his. And his friend, I don't remember which hechsher it was. I'm going to say the OU, but I don't think it was the OU. I'm just using it because that's the hechsher everybody knows. He goes to Miami, and his friend brings him into the house, and he gives him some OU parva cheddar cheese potato chips. And OU parva cheddar cheese potato chips. So the guy goes, wow, that's amazing. In New York, we don't have this stuff, right? That's amazing. OU parv, that's terrific. And he's enjoying the potato chips. Then he goes back to New York, and he's looking all over the place to find some OU. If you have it anywhere else in America, for sure you're going to have it in New York. So he's looking for these OU parva cheddar cheese potato chips. And he gets to he goes looking around. They don't have any. He goes to the supply. He goes to one of the main supermarkets there. And the guy says to him, not only we don't have parv cheddar cheese potato, we don't have any kosher cheddar cheese potato. No such thing. There is not one company that makes kosher cheddar cheese potato chips. So he calls the guy in Miami. He says, what's going on? He says, I don't know. We got it with the OU. What happened was the company, Prince, makes a regular potato chip. And they were going to make their bags. They needed a new design for the cheddar cheese. So the owner of the factory, he makes two brands. He's got the kosher potato chips. He's got the treif potato chips. So he tells the guy who makes the bags, take this design and just make the exact same design for cheddar cheese with no ill intention whatsoever. So the guy takes the bag, he sees everything written on the bag there, and he goes cheddar cheese, and now it's got a little OU parv in the corner. So now everybody's eating OU parv cheddar cheese. But now, some people, their attitude in that situation is, again, it wasn't the OU. I don't know that it was the OU. I'm just using an example. Some people's attitude in that situation is, yeah, OU, yeah. Other people say, hold on a second. Just hold on a second. It says cheddar cheese. I'm from New York, and I've never seen it before, and I know that cheddar cheese is a problem, and it's certainly a problem to be parv. Now, what the heck is going on here? See, do you dive right in? So there are certain people who are accident-prone, and there are certain people who are not accident-prone. There are certain people who are what I call halakhically accident-prone. I remember my friend Crazy Milty, when we drove into camp. We were about 15 or 16 years old, so we took the Greyhound bus from Chicago for summer camp. Then we picked us up at the bus depot. They sent the camp truck, an open-air truck, to pick up the whole bunch of us. There were a bunch of wild 16-year-olds. So we go driving into camp. It's got a gravel road. There's like one of these gravel roads in asphalt. It's asphalt with a bumpy asphalt road. So we come driving into camp, and it's pitch black at night. It's about 9 o'clock at night. And Crazy Milty stands up in the back of the truck. The truck was only going about 10, 15 miles an hour. He'd already slowed down. And Milty goes, yee-haw! And he jumps out into the night. Right? And the rest of us go on down to the lunchroom. We unload our bags. About 20 minutes later, Milty comes walking, and his hands are he's already been to the infirmary. His hands were chopped up from landing on the road. And there he was. Sure, when you behave, when you're absolutely, what do you call it? Completely, what's the word? Reckless. Reckless, thank you. You're absolutely reckless. That's what some people are reckless in halacha. And, well, did you stop and think maybe it's cheddar cheese? Did you stop and think that you've never seen it in New York where they have every type of food? Right? Why not? No, hey, listen, yeah, and you jump right in. Well, next thing.
Person might jump right in. I think I would probably check it out.
All right. So it depends how much you care. That's why there's a certain degree of negligence. Because if you really cared, you'd stop and say to yourself, hey, what's going on? I was 9 years old. We were flying back to the United States from Israel. We had lived here for a couple of years. We're flying back to move to Chicago. And we get on this Air France flight. I was starving. And, we'd order kosher meals, and the stewardess comes over, and she puts down this thing in front of me, a big slab of meat. I was really hungry. I was about to dig in, and my dad says, hold on a second. And he says to her, what is this? She says, oh, it's baked ham. So I said, get this out of here. He says, we ordered kosher meals. We haven't got kosher meals for you. We ate bananas or something. I was starving. Some people say, well, I ordered kosher meals. She put it in front of me. Now I'm going to eat it, and now we'll ask questions later. Because in my back, which means in the back of your mind, I don't want to ask the question right now because I'm afraid what I might hear. So some people get into that situation all the time. Some people are never in that situation. That's what the Torah is telling you. You are guilty also. You're guilty for having put yourself in that situation. You walked into your house. It's pitch black. And there's a woman over there. Well, why don't you stop and find out for sure who she is before you indulge? It wasn't my fault. I didn't know. I didn't know. What should I do? Yeah, well, it is your fault. I can't say you did it intentionally. You certainly didn't intentionally. You could have been a little bit more cautious. It's a remarkable idea. Last week's Parsha, do you remember that it says, when a woman makes a netter. A woman makes a netter. Do you remember what the halacha is if a woman makes a netter? A netter is a vow. The husband has veto power over a vow. The idea behind it is they can't let a woman bind herself in a vow because she might, it'll interfere with her domestic duties. So there are rules about the husband. The husband could veto her vow. Now, let's say a woman makes a vow. She makes a netter that she's not going to drink wine. The husband's in the other room. He hears the netter, and he says, veto. Veto. It's automatically vetoed. The vow is voided. Okay? This woman doesn't know her husband has vetoed it. She decides, you know what? I'm going to sin. I'm going to have some wine. The stolen waters are sweet. I'm going to have some sinful wine. And she goes and she drinks some wine. Was it an Avera? No.
Yes,
No, it wasn't an Avera because it was vetoed. There was no vow. What was her intent? Her intent was to do an Avera. But it doesn't. But she didn't do an Avera. And what does the Torah say? The Torah says, Hashem yislach la. She needs an atonement. She doesn't have to bring a korban, but she needs an atonement because of her intent to do the Avera. Now listen to this. The same Gemara that says Rabbi Akiva cried over here, the Gemara says, when Rabbi Akiva came across that pasuk, he cried. He cried. So the commentary says, I understand. Rabbi Akiva was a Tana. There were a lot of other Tanaim read that pasuk also. Why is Rabbi Akiva the first one in history ever cried when he read that pasuk? Other Tanaim read it. You know the answer? The answer is that, do you know that on Yom Kippur, we read the 10 martyrs, of which Rabbi Akiva was one of them, who were brutally executed by the Romans. And those 10 martyrs are a reincarnation of the 10 tribes who sold Yosef. Did you ever hear that idea? They became Yosef's brothers. Yosef's brothers never got an atonement. And those 10 martyrs became the reincarnation of Yosef's brothers. They were punished for that sale of Yosef. Okay? Now, when Yosef was sold, what was the intent of the brothers? The intent of the brothers was that Yosef should end up possibly getting killed. When they finally meet up with Yosef, what does Yosef say to them? He says, you intended for something negative, but God made it positive. So I got nothing against you. You have nothing to be upset about. Right? That's what it says in the Chumash. But not only were they a reincarnation of the 10 tribes, the Arizal says that Rabbi Akiva was a reincarnation specifically of Shimon. And what's that?
It's a sympathetic brother. He said, let's not kill him, we'll just throw him in a...
Right, but he was the catalyst of the entire thing. Shimon was the one who started the whole thing. And Rabbi Akiva was a reincarnation of Shimon. At some level of neshama, had the same neshama of Shimon. So when Rabbi Akiva read this pasuk that says a woman needs an atonement when she did something with negative intent, even though it turned out it was okay, so Rabbi Akiva realized, whether he knew it consciously or he sensed it at a neshama level, that there's got to be some sort of retribution for that sale of Yosef, even though it turned out well, because their intention was negative. And being Shimon, he realized that his punishment is going to be the worst of all. Therefore, Rabbi Akiva cried. Rabbi Akiva, more than anybody else, is the one that cried, because he realized that's going to be his retribution.